Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Aussie Ideas Man. This one's a little different to what I normally put out, and once again, it's the same in the sense that I just look at something on the screen and then try to talk about it. There is nothing pre-scripted at all. This one's about a trip I had, an impromptu road trip of nearly 6,000 kilometres, where I drove my EV instead of my ICE car just to see how it went in Australia. And I'm going to evaluate the trip. And this is all from memory. And for a 70-year-old, it's not easy to do. I started this trip, I think it was October 13th, and headed down south from Brisbane to Melbourne first, and then on to Adelaide a few days later. And then, of course, turned around and came back. So I've put together not pictures of the trip. You won't see any movies of me going places at all. It's not for that purpose that I make this video. What you'll see is receipts of charging stations, and hopefully I'll add up the cost, which I haven't done as yet. I've just put together the maps of the stages and the receipts, and I hope for that to prompt me on the details of the trip. In fact, since it's over 3 weeks ago that I made the trip, I'm going to have to rely heavily on memory for this. But I hope it's worth your while watching. First of all, the car in question is the BYD Atto 3, and the car itself is quite an excellent car in many ways, but it does have its bugbears. We use this car and have used it for almost 11,000 kilometres since new around Brisbane, and for that purpose it does very, very well. We have 6.5 kilowatts of solar on the roof. It's usually reasonably sunny in this part of the world, and it has proven to be very economical, but at the same time it is extremely comfortable and drives very well for a car. I know my cars, and when I first test drove it, I was impressed by its levels of comfort and refinement. Unfortunately, after buying it, I was less impressed by some of the software bugbears that it has. But overall, I'm still glad that I bought it. It suits its purpose extremely well, and that purpose is around locally. However, I decided, let's see how it'll go on a road trip. Let's see what comes. And as I said to my wife, it'll just be all part of the adventure. Just finding out whether it's good enough to road trip. So now I'll just try and move the prepared video along and stop it where I need to talk. Well, before I do that, I'll just say that on other sites, many people say I'm a no ideas man, because, well, I haven't really given too many. Just last week, I was on a camp, had a 4-day camp after this road trip for various reasons, family reasons. And on that 4-day camp in the bush, I was walking down the track, just an ordinary dirt track. There's plenty of them in the Australian bush. I was walking down the track, and what was on my mind was the fact that just recently there's been as many as 90 fires a day in southeast Queensland, and the firefighters are struggling to control these fires. And as I'm walking down the track, I looked and had an idea, and it was this. The track is only at best 4 metres wide, and the trees and undergrowth are right up to the edges of the track. Right up to the edges of the track. This means that as a fire break it's useless because there's not enough width. And yet all these tracks have no fire breaks beside them. And I thought, why aren't there about 3 metres either side, making a total of 10 metres, for roughly 30 feet for the people who still measure in that distance? If we just cleared 3 metres either side of the track so that no fire could burn across the ground surface, and the distance for flames to leap across the trees would be too great to catch fire on the other side. And so having the idea that we need a clearing at every track is not a good enough idea. Governments are pretty much broke these days and can't afford to clear. So my idea was this. Why doesn't the government just advertise that all of the trees that are inside of 3 metres of the extremes of the track, left and right, are free to be taken away by anyone? Lots of people would be happy to collect some of the smaller ones and saw them up with a chainsaw for firewood. It would be free firewood, so people would be going out everywhere just grabbing wood. But also for the really large trees, a lot of the, what are they called? At 70-year-old, it's hard to think of the names of things. Where they mill wood, those places that mill wood, can't even think of the name. But they, if they had permission to just go out and take what they liked, they would be out taking all the biggest trees for selling as, I don't know, things like fence palings, fence posts, and even furniture wood. Anything, whatever they mill trees for, if they had free ones on the side of the road, I'm sure they'd take it up. And so just by announcing that it's possible to take freely anything up to 3 metres inside a track boundary, they would be able to make fire breaks everywhere and make it easier to control fires. Well, that's totally unrelated to the video that I'm going to make, but I wasn't going to make a whole video on that one small idea. But all my life, I think, have these ideas. I don't even write them down. Haven't for the whole of my life. I haven't written down many ideas that I get that just go a bit further and solve problems. I actually once suggested to the government a way to solve a problem, and didn't like the response I got back from them. It was just lame and lazy. And so I figured governments were just deaf ears. It wasn't worth my time making suggestions. Well, that's off my chest. Let's try and see how we go with this road trip. And the first thing I did was, because I had used for the first 11,000 Ks or so on this Atto 3, because I had used it for local use only, I had not made any preparations to drive any distance away from home. So the first thing I did was go, I'm going to have to be able to recharge outside of my garage. And so I saw that RACQ, that's a motoring organisation here, sponsors a thing called ChargeFox. And so I signed up with ChargeFox and I went down to a nearby ChargeFox charging station and I gave it a try and it worked. So I thought, well, at least now I can charge at any ChargeFox station. Then I thought, well, I've heard that the infrastructure is pretty bad. I better have another backup. And so I saw that a company called EVIE, had claimed it was Australia's largest charging network. And so I promptly signed up with EVIE. I didn't try it out, but since the ChargeFox experiment worked, I figured EVIE would be similar and I could use it as needed. Now that's the extent of the preparation. Just signing up, getting the apps on my phone for 2 charging networks. And I've got to admit that's highly incomplete or a poor effort on my part, because I did that and almost the next day took off on the trip. I was learning as I go when it came to using sat-navs and things for picking up where these EV stations are. And this is one point I want to bring out straight away. The difficulty, especially it might be even more difficult because of age, but the difficulty in navigating yourself through this process of charging at EV chargers is so much worse and not likable an experience than just rocking up to a petrol station, filling up and going again. That proved to be somewhat of a nightmare as we go along. So there's a negative. And I must stress I've had discussions with people about this point, and they seem to think that it's not that much of a negative. My experience was it was a greater negative than imaginable, and hope that comes out. As I said, this is all from memory. I hope I can remember half of what happened. So anyway, I will move on to the first leg. Here it is. It says start, B&E stands for Brisbane, and it's Google Maps. It just says that the first leg was 2 hours and 5 minutes of driving to a place called Ballina. And Ballina is in northern New South Wales. We've driven out of southeast Queensland into northeast New South Wales. This some of the worst things that happened here, unrelated to EV chargers or the EV itself. Purely the bad start to this was simply between Brisbane and Tweed Heads on the New South Wales border was absolutely chock full of traffic. So much so that I think my average speed would have been 20 kilometres an hour. It was that bad. And that put me back by some hours. We left at noon in the middle of the day. We intended to stay overnight at a motel, but our plans changed when getting to different charges at a much later stage than anticipated meant that we couldn't have much choice in stopping overnight. Receptions in small towns close earlier than we had got too far down the track. So we just made this decision on the first leg to try and make use of the long charging times to have naps and to hopefully get through. Now, as I said, this is about October 13th, I think it was. And apart from that, many hours of waiting in slow traffic right up until Tweed Heads, things weren't going too badly. In the way of the drive, the car is an excellent highway cruiser, I have to admit. The comfort levels were very good. Having spent many, many hours on this drive, I find the seating extremely comfortable, and I find the car is extremely capable in all ways. So kudos to BYD making a great touring car in those respects. Also, I haven't added up all the costs, but we did a quick calculation when we got to Melbourne and found that it was roughly about $130 Australian dollars to get to Melbourne, and I roughly calculated an equivalent size car in petrol or diesel would have been about $200 more. That's a big difference. So if you're willing to take the negatives, you have that positive that your trip is relatively cheaper. It's much cheaper at home with my solar, of course, but it's not that bad with the charging stations at the moment, price-wise. Well, as I said, I'll probably do a better calculation, or you can actually see the totals of the receipts as I go along. I'm going to concentrate on just getting to Adelaide, and then I won't be talking so much because the reverse trip is not that much difference. Anyway, first charging station, the first charging station at Ballina was pretty much hassle-free. I'll move on just to see what the receipt says. Okay, this charging station was in a decent shopping centre, so you could at least buy food while you're waiting. Charging for 11 minutes, $7.55, discounted because it was Charge Fox, and it cost me $6.04. It was the 13th of October. I'll just see if there's another one. $7.55 and 11 minutes. It's pretty good. There should be another one. No. I hope I haven't missed a receipt along the way. I don't think I have. Looking back, I made sure I was at 100% before I left, and trying to use the phone and the sat nav that was in the car. I could see that we could get to Coffs Harbour, the second charging stop, without having to add too much. So I was doing rough calculations. And here's another thing that I need to point out as well. The Atto 3 says you've got about 480 kilometres on a full charge. All the time we've been using it, we can only bank on safely 400 kilometres. It's roughly 80 kilometres too optimistic, which is, to me, unacceptable. But it's just a fact, and so we bank on getting about 400 k's to that 480 that they say. When we got onto the open highway, this range quickly dropped to a safe 310 kilometres. 320 just risking it. So if you said 320, you're looking at another 80 k's knocked off the range, this time for high-speed driving. And I'm glad I bought the long-range version because we needed every bit of that. we needed a bit more of it at one stage. At 320 k's of safe driving is not good enough for the distances and the infrastructure that we have in Australia. But anyway, yes, I only put $6 worth in at the first leg, and here's the second leg. Ballina down to Coffs Harbour, central New South Wales coast. I don't think they call it that, but it's getting closer to Sydney. Coffs Harbour, we were filling up just after dark. It was a little awkward to find the location of I think it was a ChargeFox charging station again. And we, from memory, had too long to wait this time and not much to do, although there were food shops, very handy. I'll move on and see what the receipts say. Well, I've paused it now, and the receipt for it is a ChargeFox receipt. The receipt for Coffs Harbour, you can first notice, is called North Boambi Valley, and that's just some sort of little outer suburb, not right in Coffs Harbour. But Coffs Harbour, nobody knows where North Boambi Valley is. I'd never heard of it myself, but it's just as you are leaving Coffs Harbour. Anyway, charging for 10 minutes, $8.89. Now, we needed more than that. And so this brings up one of the things that occurred quite frequently as I go further along the trip. You would get a charger and you would start, well, sometimes it wouldn't even start charging. It would fail a few times and you would just persist a few times and eventually you'd get it to charge. It's a bit of a worry because in most places you have no other option except to get it working. And I had some bad experiences later, but yes, you'd try a few times and eventually they'll say, yes, I'm charging. And then you'd walk away and you'd look at your app and you'd see that it had stopped. So you're expecting to charge for much longer, but it only charges for 10 minutes. So then you have to walk back and try it a few times again and get it going again. Let's see what happened is next. There it is, the second whoops. I keep forgetting to pause it. Okay. There it is, the second one, and this time it hung on for 56 minutes, and it was, with the discount, $21.39. I'll move on. This is the third leg, Coffs Harbour to Taree. Once again, you're not really in Taree. There's a service station pretty much in the bush, more than a good walking distance away from the town Taree, and that was a bit of a problem. When you're in a car that takes petrol, you just driving along and you go, well, it's about time I filled up, and you've got so much choice as you just spot them. You're not looking for them on apps and sat navs and things like that. You just spot a service station. Price looks fine. Amenities look good. I'll choose that one, and you've got much to choose from. It's so much easier. Anyway, here we are at Taree. So now I'm going to get to this. This is Evie. ChargeFox wasn't available around here, and the networks are very bad. There are other networks, and I should have probably signed up to 5 or 6 just to make my options a little better. But from what I could tell, none of them were any good. Certainly no good for 2023, and I think you'd have to get to 2027 or so before they might become good. So this one isn't the receipt. This is the one that's just telling me, well, they call it Taree, but it's actually at Glenthrown in the bush. And I think I'm not sure, but I think I had more shots at starting this. At least coming back, I recall having quite a number of shots at starting this charger up. Okay, I'll move it on a little bit. There it is. You can see now we've decided to go into the night because it's 11:37 p.m. and it went for 32 minutes and $22.62 paid. I think I had, yeah, this is the one that I'd made a big mistake. I'll go further just to see what I've got. Yes, the second one, 16 minutes, $6.47. This isn't me stopping them, it's them deciding to stop. And I didn't think I had quite enough to get to Sydney from Taree. And so I went that, when it stopped, I went that extra 16 minutes. And then it stopped at 92%. And I thought, I'm not going to hang around for a long time because the last 10% just takes ages, which is another bugbear of having these charges. I might talk more about it later. But the last 10% is atrociously slow at all times when you're charging. And I looked at the range, tried to calculate the lower range, looked at the distance to Sydney and thought there's a chance I could make it. But because there's Newcastle and Gosford well before Sydney, I would work out where to stop as I went along. So I put that extra $6.47 in, and when it stopped the second time, I thought, that'll have to do. It was a mistake. We move on. This next leg, Taree to Pennant Hills. Pennant Hills is the northern suburb of Sydney, so you think, oh, I got to Sydney. Well, wait till you hear the story. As you can see, it's a 3-hour, 11-minute drive to Pennant Hills, so that's, when you've got only 320 k's in the safe range, it's pushing it. But somewhere down there, it doesn't even show it, but it's probably around where the sign is that is the 3 hours 11 minutes. There's a rather large satellite city of Sydney called Newcastle, and as you're going past Newcastle, it's a decent drive off the highway into Newcastle to get at the charges. And so I made the executive decision on the fly that I still had enough in the tank to maybe get me to Pennant Hills. And there was always Gosford and a fair amount of population between Newcastle and Sydney. And so I thought, I'm not going off the beaten track so far into Newcastle to find a charger. I've got enough to go on. So I went down, and as I'm going into Gosford, I got a little bit wary of the fact that it may not make it to Pennant Hills, and so I decided I would go to a charging station in Gosford. I had to go off down the hill, off the highway. Got to the charging stations. It was ChargeFox, I think, at this one. And there were two, and both of them were out of order, both broken. And I couldn't see an EV one available anywhere, and just looked a little further down the track and thought, okay, there's another one about, I think it was roughly 30 kilometres further down, and I'll go to that. So when I got to it, lo and behold, it was a single charger at a tennis centre, and it was unavailable. I don't know for what reason, I can't remember, it's a long time ago, middle of the night. But it was getting very worrying. I had decided Gosford as a safe stop, and the charging infrastructure let me down. I had to go on about 30 k's, and it let me down again. And so I headed for Pennant Hills. This is what happened. I was driving about 10 k's an hour slower than the speed limit after this, because I knew it was stretching it to get to the next charging station, the next available one as far as we could tell on the apps and the sat navs that we had, using phone sat nav as well as the car's sat nav. And so I slowed down, and then when I was almost off the freeway, before you hit Pennant Hills Road, for a few kilometres, the car slowed me down, and it said you're low on battery, and it slowed me down to somewhere around the 40 kilometres an hour zone. I can't remember the exact speed, but foot flat to the floor, and it just would not drive properly at all. It was taking me slowly, and so I'm watching the range to the range to the charging station, and my range dropping on the dash. And when I got to 1.3 kilometres away from the charging station, my range to empty was showing 10 kilometres. And at that point, on a right-hand lane, turn lane, in the middle of Pennant Hills Road, it stopped dead, showing 10 kilometres to go and only having 1.3 to go. It stopped dead, and I find that totally unacceptable. Totally unacceptable. It's bad enough that they have this optimistic WLTP range of 480 k's, and you can only do 400 in town and 320 on the highway. But for it to stop dead when it's saying you've got 10 kilometres left is absolute crazy nonsense. I have driven ICE cars for many, many years, and when they say you have no range left, you get sometimes over 50 kilometres. That's when it's told you you've got no range left. And that is a safe way to display anything to drivers. The way BYD has done it is just rotten. So yes, I had a complete empty battery. And of course, all we could do was phone the free roadside assist and wait for a tow truck. Well, while I was waiting, I pressed the start button again, and it went for another 300 metres. So I was 1 kilometre away, but at least I'd got off the right-hand turn lane of Pennant Hills Road and was on a quieter street. In any case, we had wasted a long time waiting for a tow truck, getting the thing on the tow truck just to take it a kilometre, then unloading it, and it was at a Toyota dealership where the charger was super slow. And, well, I'll go to the next receipt. Here it is, 330 Pennant Hills Road. It's a Toyota dealership. And it says I was charging for 1 hour, 46 minutes. And its total cost $31.47. Now, I didn't charge to 100%. That 1 hour, 46 minutes took me to 70%. And I said, I've had it. There was nothing around for us to do. All you could do was look at cars. There was nothing near that Toyota dealership that was provided any sort of food or amenities, anything. So I said, well, I'm in Sydney. Surely there must be another one, and I'll top up at that. So here's the next one. I went over to get some more, charging for 24 minutes at $8.49. And this one was hidden away inside a shopping centre, and it was early in the morning, and I had to wait 15 minutes before the shopping centre doors would even open so that I could get inside at the charger. Another little annoyance, but at least it charged faster, and I had enough to work out for me to get to the next leg. So here's the fifth leg. Just went too far past it. I didn't leave enough time for me to click the buttons in the play pause area. The fifth leg, Pennant Hills, it really, I didn't want to make it from Homebush. They're not too far apart, Pennant Hills and Homebush, still in Sydney. Anyway, Pennant Hills down to Goulburn, 2 hours 11 minutes, and I don't think too much bad happened here. Okay, 44 minutes of charging. It's ChargeFox, $24, discounted to $19.20. There's a RACQ discount. Yeah, only at certain times though, in certain conditions. Now, I've made a mistake with this sixth leg. It's been a pain in the butt getting all this information the way it is. And the sixth leg was from Goulburn to Barnawatha North or something like that. Now, I'm 70 years old and I've travelled this highway many, many times. And this is the first time I've ever heard of Barnawatha North. I'll explain a bit of why in a minute. So we charged at Goulburn, and we actually had to charge. You can see this is a 4 hour, 16-minute drive, and there's no way in the world the Atto 3 can go for 4 hours, 16 minutes at 110 k's an hour. Not a hope. So what we actually had done was, I think you can see it there above the sixth thing. You can see Gundagai. This is outside of Gundagai at a service station and rest stop where the dog sits on the tucker box, as the song says. It's where you can just take a short walk, 200 metres or so, from where you're charging to see that monument, the little dog on the tucker box. Anyway, the sixth leg is actually 2 legs. It's Goulburn to Gundagai, Gundagai to what turned out to be Barnawartha North. So in the half leg of Gundagai, it wasn't too difficult finding the charges, as in many cases there was some difficulty in finding the locations of charges. Not too difficult at Gundagai. And the problem we had was that there were 3 charges, which is a lot more than quite a few of them have. Usually it's 1 or 2. There were 3 charges, and 2 of them had cars in them charging up, and the third one was, of course, broken. There are so many broken ones, it's not funny. And quite often, as had happened before, all broken. So whether there's 1 or 2 there, all broken, so you've got to move on. Well, in this case, luckily the cars that were charging, also there was another car in front of us waiting, so we were 2 back. But luckily both of the cars charging were both nearly finished, and so we waited about half an hour, I think it was. And I had a little conversation with a man who was waiting with his MG ahead of me, and he actually put me onto an app called A Better Route Planner, and we decided we'd give that a go, as all the things that we were using. I've got to admit, I wasn't too good at preparing. This was an impromptu trip, so I'd done too little preparation. But anyway, I was very grateful for this man who gave me this recommendation of A Better Route Planner. And some parts of the trip after that, we had it a bit easier, but it's still not foolproof, that's for sure. On with the story. The next half of the sixth leg, I was heading for Albury, and you can see it just down the bottom of the red pin sign. Albury, and just below that, below the almost out of view, is a longer name of a town called Wodonga. These are 2 very large towns between Goulburn and probably Melbourne itself. About the biggest population are there. And so we went in looking for a station at Albury. I think it was an EV that we had to look for here, but there wasn't much on offer. And so we followed the sat-nav, and when we got to Albury, we found that it said you're here at the start of a shopping centre 3-level car park. And so we drove around the first level inside looking for an EV charger. Nothing. So we went up the ramp and we did a circuit looking hard for an EV charger on the 2nd level. Nothing. So we drove up to the top level, and as we get around, sure enough, there we see a construction fence around a charger, and it says not working. So Albury, was a town as large as Albury, was not offering too much in the way of charges. I think we found out later that there are some sites that you can have people discuss and say that certain ones aren't working, or that they're even being used or whatever. But we didn't get into that too much. We'd go to one and expect it to either work or to be there and to be available. Not so. So we had to move on, and we looked for something in Wodonga. Nothing at all. But then we saw this ahead on the, I think it was the car sat nav, and then it said that there was only about a 10-minute drive outside of Wodonga, that there was a ChargeFox charger at Barnawatha North. Well, like I said, I've never heard of it before. It takes you off the highway a little way, a couple of kilometres, not much, and there doesn't seem to be much around there. It looks a bit industrial rather than rural, but he certainly found a massive service station there, and probably the best array of chargers, other than looking at Tesla chargers that appear much better. But the best array of chargers at this service station, and they were fast chargers, 350 kilowatt chargers, and they were working, all working. I think there were 4, but anyway, all working. And so we had a good experience there. Unfortunately, Barnawatha North is a bit too far from Melbourne, and there wasn't much in between, and it's early hours of the morning by now. I'll move on. So what did I get? 43 minutes at a discounted price of $11.91, and I think this one I charged to 100% because of my experience in Sydney. I decided when I'm on a 350 kilowatt charger, I'll go the whole distance. Now, they start at 88 kilowatts. That's the maximum the car can do, and they start at 88 kilowatts, but as they go up, they soon go to 53, and then they go down to 31, and even as low as 16 by the time they get close to the end. So that's something that annoyed me. When you put fuel in a tank, it goes the same speed. The first 3 seconds you put in are the same speed in the last 3 seconds that you put it in. And it's the same all the way through, and it doesn't take long. Okay, it was actually, what have I got here? This is going down because it's still the 14th, and I got 26.65, and I'm going to have to go back and see what I've done with the other one. This is on the 14th, 1489, 33 kilowatts hours. For some reason or other, I think it must have stopped once. Where's the time? 3:48 p.m. Whoa. Getting away from me. 6:55 p.m. Same day. Okay. As I said, this was a while ago. What happened here was that we did charge and we were nearly dead flat. So we charged up, it stopped. We were having a meal and a break, and we must have come back and found it stopped and restarted it. But that seems a lot of money to put in one hit. This is a bit of a mystery. This doesn't sound right to me, but I'll let it lie. 7th leg. This is going from Barnawatha North to a place called Seymour, and Seymour's a small town before Melbourne. It wouldn't go the distance to Melbourne because Seymour was 1 hour 55 minutes away, but Melbourne was Frankston, where suburb of Melbourne where we were going, was just a bit out of reach again, unfortunately. And this Seymour one, hard to find. It was on the side of a wall of some sort of uh, public meeting house that was obscure. It was in the middle of the night. It was hard to find, and it was slow. But at least we could get something to tide us through to our destination at this stage. Of course, just sat in the car twiddling our thumbs because there was nothing to do, nowhere to go while it was charging. And this is it. An hour, $9 worth. It was it was a pitifully slow charger, this one. But we had nowhere else to go. We were stuck. Enough of that. The last leg of where we stop in Frankston, a suburb of Melbourne, at my sister's place for a few days and a break in the trip. Seymour to Frankston, 1 hour 55 minutes. And what does the receipt say? Okay. 15th, 2:23 p.m. Is that what it's saying? 2:23 p.m. This is an unusual time. I can't really remember. But you can see it's a day later, so... Oh, of course. When we got to Frankston, we just crashed in a bed. We'd had it. And it was just 2 in the afternoon when we went a few kilometres into the shopping centre again to make this charge. 57 minutes, $30.34. And we did it again. And this is only because we did some driving around. This is 17th of October. I'd been driving around quite some distances, visiting other relatives in my old stomping ground where I was raised, or close to where I was raised. And also, this was an EV station that I also went. Now this one is an example. As you can see, it's $2. If we go to the next one, it's $25.03. So you can see it stopped, and I had to restart it. Next leg. For this one, it went pretty smoothly. We were going to Adelaide, and we used the better route planner, and we stopped at the places that it told us to stop at, and it all went well. Our first charging stop after a 2-hour drive was Ballarat. And it went for 44 minutes, $19.20. And I think we went on, I don't think I had a second one there. No. We went to Horsham. Whoops. I talk and I forget to hit the pause. Okay. A 2-hour, 9-minute drive. No hassles. Horsham, the charging stations worked fine. From memory. And let's see. What did it do? $17.99 discounted, $14.39. It was a charge box. That's right. It went first go. Very good when you plug it in and it charges. Doesn't give you a few bad starts, and then it stays charging until you want to stop. I sort of work out. Sometimes I don't go to 100% because that's the good thing about a better route planner. It actually tells you your percentage from and to, and so you can modify um, going below 100% because you know how many percent you're going to need. Uh, Much better than all the others I found for that reason. So then we went on to Keith. I think it was at Keith. No, memory's gone. I'll let that ride. Charge Fox, 53 minutes. I'm discounted at 22.52. I think that was pretty uneventful. I think it worked okay. It was this one here, Tailem Bend. After only a 1 hour, 20-minute drive, at Tailem Bend, um, it actually suggested that we use the Tesla charge network. So we stopped and we, on the spot, set up the app and made it so that we could actually try out the, the charging station itself. So I plugged it in, and after numerous tries, it didn't recognise the car, uh, and it just it was numerous tries because experience was that others didn't work first time. But after a while, I gave it up as a bad joke. Uh, just just a failure. Now I've seen on YouTube other people with BYD 803s that say they can charge at a Tesla charger. So I'll just say uh, it might work for some, but it didn't work for me. I'm not saying it's not working for everybody because I've seen different. Anyway, we went a few more Ks and went to a charge. What was it? No, it was an EV, I think. Went to an EV and it worked okay. And that gave us enough to get into Adelaide. There it is. That's an EV1. Tailem Bend. $13.73. Didn't fill up completely. And so now, 1 hour, 9 minutes to Adelaide, and we've arrived. The experience Frankston to Adelaide was far better than than some of the nightmares that we endured getting down from Brisbane to Melbourne, especially just north of Sydney. Okay, too slow again. Let's see what this is. Glynn Corner Car Park. This is just a suburb inside Adelaide, where I did a bit of a top up. I don't know why it's so short a time. And then this one. I think it might have just one of those cases where they keep stopping. Okay, so now, as you can see, that last one, I'll flick back to it quickly. Tailing Bend again, we're doing the reverse trip, so I'm not going to say much about this. The reverse trip, you can just watch it through quickly. Okay, back at Keith, back at Horsham, back at Ballarat, back at Frankston, and then we head off this now. Oh, I'll just pause it for a second. Using Better Route Planner, if I can find it, we didn't go to the very slow charger at Seymour. A few kilometres up the road, there's this place I'd never heard of again called Avenel, and it was a bit better. So that's a difference just because we had used the better route planner going back rather than fumbling around with what we knew, what little we knew coming down. Okay, Gunda guy. Oh, I should. No, I'll just go on because this one here is a different one. This where things got a little better going back. This is the Benara tennis centre that was broken or unavailable at least when we were coming down, and it had told us, Better Route Planner had told us to use it. So we'd gone from Goulburn right through Sydney without using a charger in Homebush or Pennant Hills, and on up to this Berowra tennis centre where it was the second one that causes the problem on the way down. It was working, so we charged for 20 minutes and got nearly $10 worth in there. Now this wasn't to full. I only charged to 55% because I just wanted to get to something a little further up the track. And I wish I hadn't even put this in because we stopped overnight at Gosford. That's it. We decided we'd stay at Gosford overnight this time, and I thought I'll get 100% to start us off well the next day. But that night, before settling down in the hotel, we found that all around Gosford there still wasn't any available charging stations. And then we noticed that right near the hotel there was an Ampol charger, and it was actually walking distance from the hotel. And so we thought we'd give that a try. And at 55%, we went to put the app on, and the app said our Android operating system on the phones, both of our phones, was too new. It only worked on older Android systems, which is extremely bizarre. But we were a little bit desperate, so my wife phoned up Ampol and said, "How on earth can we get the app? What's going on with this? Our operating systems are too new." And the woman on the phone just told us to plug in the thing and she'll get it going. And she got it going, and she said to us, "It's complimentary." So this is the best stop we had at Ampol, which is a wonderful thing. And kudos to Ampol for doing that. That is great public relations. And they gave us 45%, and we charged right to 100%. And the lady said it's free. So best charging experience ever. If they ever get their app working on our phones, I think I'll be adding that one. But I'm sort of my mind not to even have another road trip yet. I'll just continue through now. These are EV receipts, and this is once again numerous times to try and get on. Now we're back at Ballina, and boom, we're at the end. That last one was Slacks Creek. Well, I don't know where this is going. It's restarted. I'm not good with these programs. Amazing, eh? I was an Ingress programmer, a DBA for 16 years, and I just don't even like using technology these days. Simple thing like a media player has me flustered. Uh, and that's one thing I've always said about anything in the way of Microsoft and home PC stuff. It's rubbish. It is rubbish. It's made to look fancy, but its usability it's just so bad. And one thing about Ingress and the things that I was working with in government departments is that they were safe and secure all the time. And if they can be safe and secure, I always say, why couldn't Microsoft stuff and this rubbish that we've been sold? Um, it it's just nonsense. Now, lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, the last receipt there was Slacks Creek. That was locally here just to get it back to the 100% that we we had started with. So when I go to do the costs, it'll be a little bit more accurate. Uh, what else can I say? That's right. Okay, the experience overall. Um, we had no hurry to be anywhere. If you were in a hurry to be anywhere, you'd be a mug to even try to, to use EVs in this day and age. In Australia, I'll qualify it because other countries in the world have different situations. But in Australia, it's just not worth it. Fortunately, we could just laugh at the problems and just go part of the experience, part of the adventure, and we still had an enjoyable trip despite all the problems. But I would not take a BYD 803 on another road trip in Australia, not for, well, any length of time. There are three basic problems. First one is the infrastructure is just rubbish, complete rubbish. It's no good. And the second one is that the range on the BYD 803 is not good enough to handle the distances that the infrastructure requires of you. And thirdly, the charging speed is so bad that the waits are just too long. You'd have to be a very patient person to enjoy having all those waits. It's essentially 3 hours driving for 1 hour charging. Just put in basic form. 3 hours drive, 1 hour's charge. No good. I may, well, I'm happy to buy another EV in a few years' time when I want to update. If in a few years' time I've seen that the infrastructure has improved considerably, it's that taken care of a little, and if for a second bugbear, the new EV that I buy has a range of 150 k's, roughly more than the 320 than this one has. And then thirdly, if the charging speed is not 88 kilowatts, but at least I'd say 150 minimum, but more preferably 200 kilowatts. If those three conditions are met, better infrastructure, better range, better charging speed, a trip like that just might be enjoyable. It just might be worthwhile. Obviously, the other caveat is that the costs stay roughly the same. If electricity costs go up because governments decide too many people are driving EVs, then that would kill it as well. I'd rather go in my SLK 350 and do 6 hours driving, 6 minutes refilling. And when I do that, I love taking road trips. When I take road trips in ICE cars, that 6 minutes refilling, my wife picks up a sausage roll or a Chico roll or something that I can hold in my hand and eat while driving, and we're on our way. I don't hang about at all. I eat and drive, eat and drink and drive, and just enjoy the the journey. Well, that's enough for me. Um, I hope people have got something out of it if they're looking towards doing something like this. It should put them off if they have any sense. Happy to have people comment, of course, and overall, the BYD is still great to own, but I'll use it for the original reason I bought it for, and that's locally. And bye for now. Stay safe.